Hello everyone, Coming Clean here. Playing the Skylanders games and collecting the toys is great fun and I don't regret it for 1 second. However, even though I like to think I did my research, there are a few things I wish I would have considered before I started my collection. Since a lot of people are still getting into the games, I thought to make a video about things I wish I knew before I started collecting Skylanders. I hope you'll enjoy it. I'm going to start off with a goal that most people seem to have, collecting what you need to complete every game to 100%. This is a great goal to have since we all have a little completionist inside of us, and this will also limit your spendings for some of the more expensive games in the series. There are a few things to consider though. On the excellent website SkylandersCharacterList.com, link in the description, you can clearly see all you need for 100% completion for all 6 games. Even if you do collect everything you need though, there are some things that will probably still be a thorn in your eye. In the early games, even if you have everything you need, you'll be missing out on some heroic challenges. Also, in superchargers for example, you'll be missing out on cups and other types of challenges for certain vehicle and driver pairs. Not having access to all of those things I mentioned is likely to annoy you just as much as a non-100% save file. The case will probably be the same for all the grayed out portraits on your collection menu as well. What I'm saying is, just the 100% save file will perhaps not give you the satisfaction you need, since you'll in some cases even be locked out of certain parts of the games. For some of the games, like Spyro's Adventure and Giants, it's definitely an achievable goal to get what you need for 100%. But for the expensive ones, like Trap Team and Imaginators, that have some really rare and expensive characters, you should definitely consider if it's worth tracking everything down. Before you spend much money on Trap Masters and Senseis, consider if it's worth spending a lot of money on rare traps and expansion packs. If not, you won't get 100% on the games anyway, and you might just want to experience the games with what you currently have available. For example, to unlock Cursed TIKI Temple in Imaginators, you need the Sensei Wildstorm. I have not seen him on sale for less than €100, which is almost $120. If you're not willing to spend that type of cash, you'll not get 100% save file, and you really should take this into consideration when you're collecting stuff for Imaginators. Superchargers might be an exception, but in the other games you will need a certain type of Skylander from each element for 100%. This can be a core Skylander, a swapper, or a Sensei depending on which game we're talking about. If you're on a budget and need to choose between a character of a certain element that you don't own or an expansion level, I would say that you should go for the character. Having a level or two you don't have access to is not nearly as annoying as not being able to access everything on the levels you can play, like an elemental gate for example. Another point I want to make is that you don't want to stare too much at what you need for 100%. For me, this actually led to some mistakes, which I would not have made if I would have listened to my next tip, which is watch gameplay before you buy Skylanders. Even in the first game, Spyro's Adventure, the character plays quite differently, and the moveset is not always clear just by looking at the figures. In the later games, when things get more and more expensive, there are even more things to consider. For example, to open and access everything in every elemental gate in Swap Force, you need all elements and movement types represented in your swap characters. Once I had this, I simply stopped collecting swappers. I then featured Stealth Elf in one of my videos, and a few of my viewers left comments and told me that I would probably like Trap Shadow as well. I took their advice and bought him, and I was not disappointed. If I had taken my time to do some research and watch some gameplay with the swappers, I know that I would have put Trap Shadow on top of my to-buy list. Because of my poor research, I nearly missed out on one of my favorite Skylanders. In Imaginators, the characters are even more expensive, but in my opinion the Senseis are some of the most enjoyable characters to play as. Here, it is even more important that you don't focus on just collecting all elements and battle classes. For example, Ambush, Crash and Boom Bloom are all of the life element, but they are also very different archetypes, and exactly how they play can be hard to tell just by looking at them. One of them might fit your playstyle more than the others, and since Senseis aren't cheap, you may want to see some gameplay or maybe even check out an overview video of all 3 of them before deciding which of them to buy. In some cases, it might even be a good idea to check out their moveset descriptions in the fandom wiki page. There is nothing wrong with collecting more characters than you need, but you may be in a position where you want to save some money, and then research is key. But maybe you want to collect every Skylander and expansion pack anyway, Which brings us to the next point, is collecting everything a good idea? I can warn you right away that this is a wallet-busting undertaking, but even if you want to collect everything for just a few of the games, there are things to keep in mind about that too. For example, getting a hold of all original 32 characters for the first game, Spyro's Adventure, is an achievable goal for sure. This will give you a huge amount of playable characters to choose from, but know that a single playthrough is not nearly enough to level them all up to any large extent. You'll lack both experience and gold by the end and are going to have to grind through the game several times to unlock even the 2 upgrade paths for all characters. This might be fine, of course. It's a great game, but if you're eager to delve into the sequels, it might not be something you're prepared to do. The same principle goes for all the sequels too, even though gold is much more abundant in some of them. Collecting all the characters will quickly give you more Skylanders on your shelf than you have the time to actually play with. I would like to add though that grinding with different characters in the Skylanders games might not be a bad thing. Even in Spyro's Adventure, they have very varied movesets, and in the later games, I would have to say that they play quite fundamentally differently. Speaking of collecting all characters, let's move on to the most controversial point on my list. Is it necessary to collect all games? Okay, before you turn off the video, let me just clarify what I mean. These are all great games, but for many players, Skylanders Giants, the second game, was their first one, and that didn't seem to ruin anyone's experience of the franchise as a whole. All the games have a story and a narrative, but it's not to the point that it will leave you confused beyond measure should you miss one of them. You may, for example, not own a console that you can play the older games on, Spyro's Adventure and Giants, and even though those games are great and also quite cheap to collect all figures for, you may want to play Supercharger on the PS4 you already own before you scour the internet for cheap deals on Xbox 360s, just to see if the games are for you or not. Skipping Trap Team and Imaginators might also save you a couple of $100, but those two seem to be many people's favorites, so you may want to think twice about that one. I understand if you want to buy all 6 games, it's what I did after all, but I don't think there's any rush in collecting all of them at once. I just have one more point left on my list, and it's about the reposes. This might be old news for many of you veterans out there, but it's worth pointing out anyway. And it's of course that the reposes are backwards compatible. Many characters have gotten their Series 1, 2, 3 and sometimes even Series 4 version of themselves, and they are all backwards compatible. This is Series 3 Prismake, also called Hyper Beam Prismake. If you play Spyro's Adventure and put him on the portal, he will appear as the Series 1 version of himself. If you play Giants, he will appear as the Series 2 version of himself. And if you play Swap Force, he will be Series 3, the one he actually is. Getting the latest version of any gaming character is therefore always better, since you get the previous versions of the same character for free. This will save you time, space and money. Collecting all versions of the same character is only necessary if you want to collect all versions for some reason, or maybe if you want to experience both upgrade paths without having to reset your only figure. Those were all the tips I had for people who are collecting Skylanders, or for anyone who is planning on doing so. Feel free to share any tips you may have in the comment section. Also, if you like this video, consider subscribing, since I release videos every week. That is however it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Coming Clean, and I will see you next time. Take care!